My name is Peter Bruninger. I'm here with Stef from the High End Zone and Kurt. Kurt is from Trinnov, and I would like you to tell the story about how you make three-dimensional images in theaters throughout the world. Stef, lead off.
All right. Kurt is a genius with 3D sound. Working with him on a client project was one of the most exciting things I've done in almost 20 years in this business. We were sitting there with a client 1,000 miles away from Kurt. I'd never actually met him in person at that point, looking on our iPads as he tuned 24 channels of sound in the client's system, similar to this, where we have 27 channels here in this room of speakers and subs that we'd installed. And we were sitting there with our iPads in the virtual terminal app, in Trinnov's, the Trinnov box basically, looking as he adjusted the curves for these loudspeakers and subs, and as he did it, explained to the client what he was doing and all the different changes that he could make, how he could pull the dialogue out, make it easier for the retired customer to hear the voices in the movies that he loves to watch. It was just the most fantastic thing, and I want to have Kurt involved in every home theater project that we do going forward.
Now, I want the viewers to know,
Hello.
it's very great for joining us. I want the viewers to know Kurt's been doing this since 2004. He's a founder of Trinnov. He does independent consulting throughout the world for extreme systems. What's the biggest system you've ever designed?
The biggest system?
Yeah.
Oh, well, we've done them where we max out all the channels, of course.
Yeah,
so
cool.
In Germany, the client that I mentioned to you earlier, very early on, when we first brought out the processor, I had 10 of them that I did before we released them through normal distribution. And it was basically people like you who have home theaters and you wanted to do it, and so you were looking around and you knew you wanted to do this. So basically, I worked with them, I did the design, and then did the tuning. And come back here, come back here. The reason I brought her in here is because when I work with this family on this room, the way you make 3D work, and a lot of people don't get this, is the very first thing you do is you get the design right, right? So Stef's talking about how I tuned the room remotely, but a big part of that is having the speakers in the right place, all of this. And she worked with me with the drawings. So I needed to know what the room looked like in a 3D dimensional way, right? So I can project, talk to the client about where we needed more speakers, so we had that discussion. And then I worked with you, and you did an excellent job of making the drawings, which makes my life easy, right? And then Kevin, who's not here, he goes out and he hooks things up. So he's the other element in this thing, right? But they get that all done perfectly for me, just like any integrator would, right? But the benefit is you have the team, they get that done. When it comes time for me to tune, my job's easy. Then I can look at the room, I can see what's going on acoustically. I can say, okay, we need to do this, we need to do that, if we can mitigate it or not. And then you get the results. But the idea is that the placement of the speakers in the room are considered in advance, essentially, to make all the different formats work. And so when we place the loudspeakers, I'm placing them knowing exactly how I'm going to tune the room, right, to get the results. And so it's a family affair. You know, you all work together to make that happen.
And by placement, just like in this room, we mean placement in the 3D context. I wish the viewers could see the 27 channels I'm looking at. But so Kurt sat and calculated the exact angles for all of these speakers. So each speaker is angled in 3 dimensions towards the listening positions, the listening
Good
area.
example is this one right
So,
here. You know, it's towed in, it's not aiming straight ahead.
You don't know how easy it
So
is
there's
for
focus. You know,
hand, but
that's essentially what we did
show
here
the
in this
viewers.
room.
And when we work with a client, we talk with the client and say, what's your favorite place in the theater to sit? And will you be sitting with many people most of the time or yourself? So we get input from the client directly to ask them specifically, how are you best going to enjoy the theater? And that's the measurements we go off.
Oh, that's, by the way, that's a big, big benefit of the new technologies. In the old days, what you had to do is you had to do exactly that, find out where they wanted to sit, but only have that one seat. That all is gone now. What you get today is you can have multiple seats. So typically in a theater you might have 3 or 4 rows, or maybe even only 2. And that front row might be a little close to the screen, the middle row might be just right, and the one in the back. But if you imagine you like the IMAX experience for action, but for drama you want to be further back, or you want to feel more of a bigger space, we can tune the room for having front row, middle row, back row, or all rows. So it's very easy to do. And then the client, when they look at their iPad or whatever they're using to control their system, you just select, I want to be in the front row, I want to be in the middle row, I want to be in the back row. And as you do, the room just expands.
So for my fly fishing ranch in Montana, I have a structure next to it. I'm going to build a home theater. So I would send to Stef and to you the architectural drawings of the room. And then you guys would work with you.
Yes, we'd have a conversation. We'd be talking to you,
Understand.
Peter, and we'd be finding out, how
Yeah.
do you use that
Okay.
room? Are you a bachelor? Do you only go there yourself? Right? Or
Questions
do you
like
have a
that.
family that comes twice a year? You know, it really depends, basically.
And do you have any hearing difficulties?
Yeah,
Because
yeah, that's
Kurt
right.
is able to adjust the calibration with the Trinnov to really your hearing, your experience. Do you love to hear the center channel scream out, or can you like?
I did a client
Do
in
it
Jackson Hole.
without.
That's the exact thing I did for a client in Jackson Hole. His wife was hard of hearing, 3D room. We got it perfect for him, and then we did a compromise that still
Yeah,
kept the 3D
wonderful.
integrity, but brought up the clarity of the voice, right? And made it work for her. So all these things are possible. I would say the most important aspect about us, my working with them and with other people, we're really after what you, the client, wants rather than what we want. So I'm not here to stamp what I do each time on somebody and impose that. I'm really looking at the client, what they want, right? Give them what they want. Make it for them, because it's yours, right?
Right.
Some people want more bass. Some people want more dialogue punch, like you're talking about, right?
Right.
Yeah,
And-
Kurt's
I think that's
continuously involving the client in the process in a great way. And not only that, but even after we've left the home, Kurt can continue to make adjustments. So basically the client can continue to have us on retainer, and with minimal cost can say, well, I'm having a big Super Bowl party coming up. Could you give me a tuning? That would be great if I had, you know, a bunch of extra chairs
that's
brought
it.
in.
Yeah.
And,
Cool.
That's it.
you know, in a short time, Kurt can do that without any of us having to, you know, roll out to the client's house, make an expensive house call. No, Kurt's just sitting in his studio doing that electronically through the internet. And
We can
that's
even
a
verify
terrific
if
factor.
if the client says, you know what, it sounds like there's a tweeter out or something, or a mid-range. We can actually verify that remotely.
Cool, so that you can plug in via remote,
And
look
we'll
on your
know.
screens and see what their systems are doing.
Absolutely.
That's outstanding.
Yeah, he
That's
literally
great.
sees a graph of the performance of every driver, every speaker in the room.
I've gotten
it's
called on
incredible
my
what,
phone
he
and
can
been
see.
asked to update a system or look at it, and I've done it on my iPhone. So
That is too
Excellent.
cool.
yeah, it's happened, so definitely.
Well, it's a real pleasure to have you introduce you to the viewers and to all of your clients who are considering putting in a 3D theater. This is the team to do it.
Thank you very much, Peter. And I want to make sure, while you're in here, in this Stark Atmos room that high-end zone is
Absolutely, yeah.
created with Stark, with Trinnov, with JVC, with Seymour Screen Excellence, Kaleidoscape, and these other fine partners. You know, you can see here
Oh,
we've
yeah.
got the Stark A7 Mark II amplifiers. This is the U.S. debut for those. I hope you'll be able to take a little bit of film around the room and show some of the other fine products that are in here, because this is definitely a team effort. I understand there may be an award coming for one of these fine Stark products. I'm not really supposed to say, but understand there may be an award coming at the banquet tonight, so look forward to that by the time the viewers are seeing this video.
Very good. Well, it's a pleasure to meet you guys. What a great team you make. And to our viewers out there, you know who to call. Stef from the high-end zone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Peter.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Watching those AV Showrooms videos.
Thank you. Okay, now we're in the middle of the room here, Kurt. Can we walk over to the speakers and see something? Let me follow.
Okay.
Here we go. Let's follow you over.
So we have the fronts, and you'll notice that they're paired together. And what we have is the left, the center, and the right are all paired together. And it was my thought as a designer, given that these are domes and so on, we're a very large room, it's 50 feet long, that we might have problems with blowing out tweeters, and I wanted to back up. And I can tell you this room has been playing loud, and that hasn't happened. There's not been any room for it. And these are quite nice because these are beryllium tweeters.
Now, I understand also that the speakers that are mounted up on the upper framework here are aimed at different positions for the listeners.
Correct.
Tell us about how you figured that out and do that and implement that.
Primarily, the idea here is that you don't want to be off axis to the speaker because you get problems with during the crossover and so on where you get dips in the response, right? Physically, between the drivers from not being physically aligned with them. So we're trying to align the drivers as much as possible to the listening space. You can always do room correction, but it's better to do the correct physical placement first. Then do what you need to after that. Now, if you look underneath the screen here, you're going to notice that there's two loudspeakers there. Just the bottoms of them, the same as the left and the rights.
Got it.
So that's it. But you can see up above, so I'm looking at the angles to the listeners and trying to get the correct geometry for all the different formats. Primarily, we're only using Atmos in here. You can go over to the next one. From here, it's a good spot. You can see it's the wide, and then we begin the sides. And really, the benefit of having more than 7.1 is when you're in a 5.1 or 7.1, you typically really localize the loudspeakers. And it's not until you get the higher speaker count to where they blend in and you don't hear the individual loudspeakers. The same thing applies to the ceiling. You know, if you only have 4 speakers in the ceiling, you're going to run into that thought, oh, I'm hearing the front left one, I'm hearing the rear right one, or whatever. But if you have enough of them, literally the sound will rise from below up.
That's so
make
cool.
that happen.
So that's part of the 3D effect by having so many speakers all around you. In other words, this is the tomb of loudspeakers.
Yeah, come back here. I want you to see the positioning of the speakers above the listeners' heads.
Okay.
So if you look at this, and you look at these loudspeakers, and see my head,
Yes.
where I am? Okay. So if the room is filled, you see how they can come over the
They're
tops
coming
of
over the
heads,
tops of other
right?
people's heads to come into the
Correct.
listener.
And because these are mid-tweeter mid, I had to be very careful about getting too far off axis because you lose the formation of the wave off the listener. Now, if this were a smaller theater and you didn't have as many seats, we'd probably lower them even more, right? Because you're trying to be in a bubble.
Understood.
So the idea is you really don't want them up high like you did in 7.1.
I got it. That's a really good phrase.
The other
sonic
thing,
bubble. That's great.
The other thing about this that's interesting is a lot of theaters will aim the speakers at each row. Now, if you had a 7.1 room, that works really well. But when you're trying to make every speaker available to every person in the audience, you really have to rethink how you're going to lay the speakers out. So that's what's been done here.
Well, it's very cool. I want to thank you very much, Kurt, and the team back here. Thank you very much for inviting us into. It's the best theater I've ever heard. It blew my mind. It's totally awesome.